sit here before me, each carrying the silent burden of desire, the restless pulse of wanting, and the heavy cloak of incompleteness that the world has taught you to wear. I see it in your eyes, in the way your breath falters between anticipation and doubt, in the way your soul leans forward as if something vital is about to be revealed. And indeed, something is. You came here to understand what it means to live without need, and perhaps you think it is a paradox. How can one attract everything by needing nothing? But paradox is the language of the soul. The unconscious, which governs far more of your destiny than the fragile flicker of conscious will, speaks in riddles, in images, in opposites, united in a single symbol. When you need nothing, you are no longer a slave. You are no longer possessed by the hungry ghost of your own shadow, by the tyrant of your unmet childhood needs, by the endless cycle of projection that seeks its completion in others. Most people live as if their life is an unfinished sentence, constantly searching for someone else, some experience, some possession to complete the phrase. But I tell you, the self, the archetype of wholeness, that is your innermost truth, has no need. It is eternal, untouchable, full in itself. Need belongs to the ego. And the ego, fragile and mortal, believes itself to be the totality of your being. The tragedy of man is not that he is small, but that he mistakes himself for something less than the vastness he truly is. Consider for a moment the symbol of the circle or the mandala, which appears again and again in dreams and visions across cultures. The circle is wholeness, completeness, the union of opposites, the reconciliation of contradictions. In the circle, there is no striving, no lack, and yet most of you live in the fractured line, running endlessly from point to point, believing that salvation lies just beyond the next milestone, the next lover, the next possession. The unconscious dreams in circles, but the ego walks in straight lines, and so you live divided. Let me take you deeper. Imagine a dream. You are in a marketplace, surrounded by treasures, gold, spices, perfumes, dazzling ornaments. You reach out to take them, but each one crumbles in your hand. The more you grasp, the more they dissolve. You are left with dust and an aching emptiness. And then, from the corner of your vision, you see a still figure, a beggar clothed in rags, sitting quietly, as if untouched by the frenzy. You approach, angry, desperate, demanding why he does not seek like the others. And he turns, and his face is your own. This is the image of the self whispering to you: when you stop grasping, when you rest in nothing, then you possess everything. Do you understand? Desire is a trap, and yet it is also a teacher. To desire is human, but to remain enslaved to desire is to never awaken. Every time you say, I need this, I must have this, you are not speaking from the fullness of your soul, but from the emptiness of a wound. That wound, if ignored, becomes projection. You project your longing onto others, expecting them to carry the weight of your unconscious need. You say, I love you, but often you mean, I need you to complete me. This is not love. This is bondage. True love arises only when you no longer need, when you can meet another not as a beggar but as a sovereign. Let us consider archetypes. The lover archetype burns within each of you, and it seeks union, beauty, ecstasy. But if the lover is possessed by unconscious need, he becomes an addict, clinging, devouring, consuming what he cannot truly hold. The magician who should bring transformation becomes a manipulator when enslaved to need. The warrior who should fight for meaning becomes violent when he fights only to feed his fragile ego. But the king, the archetype of wholeness and sovereignty, he needs nothing, for he is rooted in himself, grounded in the eternal, and because he needs nothing, he attracts all loyalty, all prosperity, all harmony. When you stand in the archetype of the king within yourself, you do not chase, you magnetize. I will tell you another dream. A young man once came to me, tormented by anxiety. He dreamed he was climbing a mountain, desperate to reach the summit, his body bleeding and exhausted. At the peak, he found not a palace or a treasure, but an empty throne. He sat upon it, and in that moment, the mountain dissolved, the pain ceased, and he realized he had been king all along. The throne was within him. This is what it means to need nothing. The world bows to the one who sits firmly in the throne of his own soul. But you must not misunderstand me. To need nothing does not mean to be indifferent, cold, or detached from life. It does not mean to renounce beauty, love, or the fire of desire. It means to enter them from fullness rather than from emptiness. The one who needs nothing can enjoy everything, for nothing owns him. He can love fiercely because he is not enslaved by fear of loss. He can pursue dreams without being broken by failure. He can walk among riches without becoming a prisoner of greed. To need nothing is to walk free in the marketplace of life. And yet, you will resist this teaching because the ego thrives on need without its cravings, its endless hungers. It fears annihilation. The ego says, if I do not need, then who am I? And this is precisely the doorway into transformation. When you confront the terror of nothingness, you discover the vastness of the self. In Eastern traditions, they call it emptiness. In alchemy, it is the nigredo, the blackness, the death of old form. Out of this void, the new arises, the philosopher's stone, the symbol of eternal wholeness, is born only when all false gold has been burned away. I speak to you now not as a lecturer, but as one who has walked through the abyss of his own soul. I have faced the desert of need, the agony of emptiness, the howling of the unconscious demanding fulfillment, and I have learned that when you finally let go, when you surrender the illusion that anything outside can complete you, then the self, like a great sun, rises within. You become luminous, and everything you once chased now circles you like planets around a star. The task before you is not easy. To need nothing requires immense courage, for you must face your own shadow. You must confront the parts of yourself you have denied: the child who was abandoned, the lover who was betrayed, the dreamer who was mocked. These wounds are the source of your need. They whisper, find someone to heal me, find something to cover me, find some goal to prove I am worthy. But when you turn inward and embrace these shadows, when you say, I see you, I love you, you belong, then the wound transforms into wisdom, the hunger into strength. I will pause here, but not to end, only to allow the silence to deepen, like the breath between heartbeats. For in that silence, you may begin to taste the truth of this paradox. When you need nothing, you attract everything. You see, the unconscious does not waste its symbols. Every dream, every sudden image that intrudes upon your waking mind carries within it the wisdom of centuries, the heritage of the collective unconscious. When you dream of losing your possessions, of standing naked in a public square, of finding yourself in a house with no furniture, it is the psyche's way of stripping you of false securities, calling you back to that state of needing nothing. It terrifies the ego, because the ego believes survival depends on grasping, on accumulation, on the constant hoarding of external proofs of worth. But what the unconscious seeks is your freedom, and freedom can only be tasted in the emptiness where need dissolves. Many of you have been taught that emptiness is absence, that nothingness is annihilation. Yet in the mystical traditions, nothingness is not barren. It is the womb of creation. The Tao speaks of the usefulness of the empty vessel. The alchemist knows that without the dissolution into blackness, no transformation can occur. In your own lives, whenever you have lost what you thought you could not live without, you discovered after the tears, after the despair, that a new strength emerged, a new possibility opened. You feared the void, but the void was your teacher. When you need nothing, you become aligned with this mystery. You enter the paradoxical state where fullness arises not from accumulation but from surrender. The magnetism of such a soul is immense. For others, unconsciously sense the wholeness in you. They are drawn not because you offer them completion, but because you reflect to them the forgotten image of their own self. You attract everything, not by striving, but by being. This is the great secret. But to arrive there, you must first encounter the shadow. For the shadow is nothing but the sum of all your unmet needs, all the desires you could not admit, all the cravings you exiled into darkness. It appears in your anger, your yelasse, your compulsions, your addictions. It whispers through your judgments of others, for what you condemn outside is often what you cannot face within. To need nothing is not to deny the shadow, but to integrate it, to look it in the eyes and say, I no longer run from you. I no longer project you onto others. You are mine, and I embrace you. I remember a patient who dreamt night after night of a hungry wolf. It followed him through forests, into his own house, even into his bed. He woke sweating, terrified. At first, he tried to kill the wolf in his dreams. He ran, he fought, he hid, but the wolf grew stronger each time. Only when he turned, trembling, and offered his hand to the wolf, did the dream change. The wolf licked his palm, and he realized it was not his enemy, but his power. That wolf was his own need, his unacknowledged hunger. By facing it, He no longer had to feed it blindly in the outer world. He became free. Do you understand the depths of this? Most of your lives are governed by unconscious wolves. You call it ambition, love, duty, but often it is need disguised. You pursue wealth because you fear worthlessness. You seek beauty because you fear rejection. You demand loyalty because you fear abandonment. And so long as you are driven by these unconscious wolves, you will never be free. The more you feed them, the hungrier they become. But when you embrace them, when you say, yes, I was abandoned. Yes, I am afraid. Yes, I long for love. Then the wolf transforms. Need dissolves and strength arises. Now let us enter another image. Imagine yourself as a tree. The ego, when full of need, is like a tree with shallow roots, stretching desperately for water from every passing rain. Such a tree is fragile, dependent on external conditions, trembling at every drought. But when you drop the illusion of need, you send your roots deep into the hidden waters of the soul. You no longer depend on the fickle sky, for your nourishment comes from within. And then, without striving, your branches bear fruit, your flowers bloom, and birds come to nest. The tree does not chase the birds, yet it attracts them. This is the image of the one who needs nothing. But beware, the ego will attempt to counterfeit this state. It will say, I need nothing. While secretly seething with suppressed hunger, it will wear detachment like a mask, while inside it festers with bitterness. True freedom cannot be faked. It arises only when you have descended into the depths, embraced your shadows, and discovered the hidden wellspring of the self. The counterfeit will repel others, but the authentic will attract without effort. The world itself mirrors this truth. Consider the great figures of history who radiated magnetism. They were not those who chased approval, but those who stood rooted in themselves. Think of prophets, sages, mystics, whether Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree, Christ in the wilderness, or the hermit in the desert. Their power lay in their lack of need. They were not seducing followers, they were embodying wholeness, and because they needed nothing, everything gathered around them, disciples, sages, empires, myths. You too have this potential, though it frightens you. To need nothing is to step into your own sovereignty, to cease playing the child who begs and to become the adult who creates. It means facing the unbearable loneliness of standing whole. Many resist it, preferring the familiar chains of dependence, the comfort of saying, I cannot live without you. But I tell you, you were born to live with the self, and in that union, you discover the well of all love. There is another dream I must share. A woman came to me restless in her marriage, haunted by dissatisfaction. She dreamt of carrying a jar of water, always cracked, always leaking. No matter how much she filled it, it drained away. She believed it meant she needed more from her husband, more devotion, more recognition. But as we explored, she realized the jar was her own emptiness, her own refusal to drink from the inner spring. When she turned within and began to honor her own soul through creativity, solely to the prayer, the dream shifted. The jar became whole, and she no longer demanded from her husband what he could not give. Their love deepened, paradoxically, when she no longer needed him to complete her. Do you see? When you need nothing, you can truly love, for then love is no longer a bargain, a desperate exchange of wounds, but a free gift between two sovereign souls. And this is why you attract everything. The world, sensing your wholeness, pours itself into you, because it longs to return to its own center. Let me leave you, for this moment, with the silence of the mandala. Close your eyes and see the circle. Radiant, unbroken. Place yourself in its center. There, in that stillness, feel the paradox. You need nothing. And in that very state, everything begins to move toward you. There is a silence that follows surrender, a silence so profound that at first it may feel like death. The ego, accustomed to constant noise, plans, ambitions, anxieties, strategies, cannot tolerate such stillness. It believes that without striving it will perish, that without needing it has no identity. But if you endure this silence, if you do not rush to fill it with distractions, then something extraordinary happens. From within that silence, the self begins to speak, not in words, but in images, in symbols, in a deep inner resonance that feels like remembering what you had always known. This is why I insist that you cannot discover the fullness of life while you are still clinging to your needs. Your needs are like clouds obscuring the sun. They may be compelling, they may even feel urgent, but behind them shines the eternal light of the self. When you need nothing, you are no longer blocked. You become transparent to that light, and others experience you as radiant, magnetic, alive. They do not understand why they are drawn to you, but it is because you have ceased to be possessed by lack. Let us not be naive. To reach such a state is not a simple path. It is a work of individuation, the journey into the depths of the unconscious, where you encounter both your demons and your gods. At first, it is terrifying. The unconscious will show you all the faces you have rejected, all the hungers, all the desires, all the fears you would rather not admit, to sit with them without trying to cover them, to allow yourself to feel the hunger without immediately reaching for satisfaction, is a kind of crucifixion, but only what is crucified can resurrect. A patient once dreamed that he was being chased through a city of mirrors. Every corner he turned, another reflection appeared, faces of himself distorted, monstrous, grotesque. He ran until exhausted, until finally he collapsed before one mirror and whispered, "Enough." In that moment, the mirror shattered, and behind it was a doorway opening into a vast garden. He realized that by refusing to run, by facing the horror of his distorted self, he found the path to paradise. This is the symbolic work required to dissolve need, the willingness to face every reflection of your own hunger until you discover the wholeness that has always been hidden behind it. When you say, "I need nothing," you are not denying your humanity, you are affirming your divinity, you are recognizing that at your deepest level you are already whole. Needs may arise. Of course you will still hunger, still thirst, still desire companionship, but you will no longer be enslaved by them. You will engage them consciously, freely, as expressions of life, rather than as desperate attempts to fill an inner void. Consider the archetype of the hermit. In the tarot, he stands alone with a lantern, walking into the night. He carries nothing but his light, and yet he is rich beyond measure. For the hermit symbolizes the soul that has turned inward, that no longer depends on the applause of the crowd, that no longer seeks validation in possessions. His solitude is not poverty. It is fullness, and because he needs nothing, he becomes a guide for others, a beacon in the darkness. The alchemists understood this truth. They spoke of the lapis philosophorum, the philosopher's stone, which could transform base metals into gold. But this stone was never about literal alchemy. It was about the soul that, having burned away every false need in the fire of transformation, discovered the incorruptible gold within. The lapis is the self. The one who possesses it needs nothing, for he carries within him the fullness of life. And yet, paradoxically, such a person becomes a source of abundance for the world. Everything flows toward him because he has become aligned with the eternal. Do you feel the tension of this paradox? It is like breathing. You inhale because you are empty. You exhale because you are full. But what happens if you cling to the inhalation, always grasping for more? You suffocate. And if you cling to the exhalation, refusing to receive, you also die. To need nothing is not to stop breathing, but to surrender to the rhythm of life, to trust that emptiness and fullness flow naturally. You no longer panic when you are empty, nor do you cling when you are full. You simply breathe, and in that rhythm, everything you need arrives without striving. A woman once told me of a recurring dream. She stood at the edge of an ocean, clutching shells to her chest, terrified they would be taken by the tide. But the tighter she held, the more they cut into her skin. Finally, in one dream, she let the shells fall. And as the waves carried them away, she wept. Yet in her empty hands, she noticed pearls, smooth and luminous, gifts from the sea itself. The unconscious was teaching her what you cling to will wound you. What you release will transform. And so I tell you, release. Release your belief that you must chase love, chase success, chase validation. When you need nothing, you allow the tide of life to bring you its pearls. And these pearls are always more radiant than the shells you once clutched. But beware of self-deception. To proclaim, I need nothing, while secretly despising the world or suppressing your desires, is another form of bondage. True freedom comes only when you embrace the fullness of your humanity, your desires, your fears, your wounds, and discover that beneath them all lies a deeper ground, a self that is already whole. This is not withdrawal from life, but a deeper participation in it. You will still love, still create, still labor, but from a place of abundance rather than desperation. Think of the sun. It shines without asking, without needing. It does not demand recognition. Yet all life turns toward it. The sun is the image of the self in its fullness. To need nothing is to become like the sun, radiant, abundant, magnetic. You give without depletion. You attract without striving. And this is why those who have reached such a state are often misunderstood. People project onto them their own unmet needs, believing they must have secrets, strategies, some hidden power. But the truth is simple, they have ceased to need. Let us pause here. Close your eyes and imagine yourself standing in the center of a circle. Around you swirl all the things you once chased: faces, possessions, accolades, fears of abandonment. See them orbiting, but you remain still, rooted in the center. You are no longer reaching outward. You are luminous. The circle is complete. This image, if you hold it within, will begin to work upon your unconscious, for the psyche responds to images more than to arguments. And the mandala of wholeness has the power to reshape your inner world. And so, my friends, do not be afraid of needing nothing. It is not death, but rebirth. It is not loss, but the discovery of the inexhaustible treasure that was hidden within you all along. When you stand in that place, you will discover that life, like iron drawn to a magnet, flows toward you without effort. This is the secret. The unconscious has been whispering through your dreams, through your longings, through every paradox you have encountered. When you need nothing, you attract everything. Do not mistake me. My friends, when I tell you that to need nothing is the highest freedom, it does not mean you will walk without longing, without the ache of the heart, without the pull of desire. No, these are part of the fabric of human life, threads woven into the tapestry of your being. What changes is your relationship to them. No longer do you cling, no longer do you chase, no longer do you collapse before the altar of your own hunger. Instead, you witness, you engage, you allow longing to be what it is, a movement of the soul toward growth. You hold it, but it does not hold you. When the unconscious presents you with dreams of emptiness, a barren house, an endless desert, a cupboard with no food, it is not to torment you. It is to prepare you for the revelation that emptiness is not the enemy. Emptiness is the vessel in which the self descends. You cannot pour new wine into a vessel already overflowing with stale water. You cannot invite the self into a psyche cluttered with the debris of endless needs. This is why so many spiritual traditions speak of fasting, of renunciation, of silence. They are not commands meant to punish, but invitations to create space. And when space is created, life rushes in. You may fear that if you no longer need, life will lose its fire. But the opposite is true. When you are no longer consumed by need, you become available to true passion. Passion is not the frantic hunger that devours, but the sacred flame that illuminates. To love without need is to love with the full force of your soul. To create without desperation is to create from the wellspring of eternity. To act without the chains of outcome is to act with the freedom of a God. This is why those who reach this state are often misunderstood. They are accused of indifference, of detachment, of being above it all. But in truth, they are more deeply engaged with life than anyone else. Their laughter is fuller because it is not chained to fear. Their tears are purer because they are not bargaining for pity. Their solitude is rich because they are never alone. They walk with the self, the eternal companion. Let me give you another image. In a dream that came to a man tormented by loneliness, he stood in a vast hall filled with mirrors. Each mirror showed him alone, his figure small and isolated. He wept, but then one mirror cracked, and through it he saw a great fire. He stepped into it and felt himself dissolve into light. When he emerged, he saw the hall anew, not as mirrors, but as windows. Beyond each one were others walking in their own journeys, each luminous in their own way. His loneliness had been a prison of need. When he surrendered, when he needed nothing, he discovered connection everywhere. This is why I tell you that when you need nothing, you attract everything. You attract not because you are trying, not because you are manipulating, but because you are aligned with the deepest truth of life. The self does not chase, it radiates. The mandala does not run after the broken line. It draws all fragments into its wholeness. I know, of course, that the ego resists this teaching. It whispers, but if I stop needing, won't I lose everything? Won't I be left with nothing? And I answer yes. You will lose everything that was never yours to begin with. You will lose your illusions, your projections, your desperate bargains, your chains, but in their place you will gain the only thing that has ever truly belonged to you, the wholeness of yourself. And in that wholeness, everything that is truly yours will come unbidden, as naturally as breath returns after exhalation. There is a dream I once carried within myself, not of another, but of my own soul. I stood before a great river, its waters rushing violently, carrying away all that floated upon it. I panicked, trying to save scraps of wood, fragments of possession, faces of loved ones slipping downstream, and then I heard a voice step into the river. Terrified, I obeyed. The waters tore from me every possession, every mask, every name I had ever clung to. I thought I would drown, but when I emerged on the other side, I was radiant, clothed in nothing but light. And on the far bank, everything I had ever loved awaited me, not as possessions, but as companions, whole in themselves. This, my friends, is the essence of individuation. To enter the river of nothingness, to surrender your desperate needs, to allow yourself to be stripped bare until only the eternal remains, and then to discover that life returns to you magnified, purified, true. So I say to you, be brave enough to need nothing. Be brave enough to face the wolf of your hunger, the void of your emptiness, the silence of your soul. Be brave enough to sit on the throne within, even when the world clamors for you to chase its illusions. Be brave enough to be whole, and in that wholeness you will attract, without effort, love will find you, not because you begged for it, but because you became love itself. Success will come, not because you clawed for it, but because your very presence radiates meaning. Peace will dwell in you, not because you escaped the world, but because you reconciled the world within yourself. Remember always, the greatest paradox of the psyche is this: what you chase will flee, but what you release will return transformed. The one who needs nothing is the one who possesses everything. And so, as I leave you with these words, do not cling to them as if they are the final treasure. They are but seeds. Let them fall into the soil of your unconscious. Water them with your silence. Nourish them with your dreams. And allow them to grow in their own time. The harvest will not come by striving. It will come by surrender. And when it does, you will know, not as theory, but as lived truth. When you need nothing, you attract everything.